Welcome to our podcast. Today we are discussing Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson.
I'm Matthew Middlecox.
And I am Braden Deaton. I'll start us off by asking, how did you like the book?
I liked it. It was a little hard to get super interested into it, but I did find it easier to read than some books that had a lot of action. It wasn't too hard to read.
Yeah, I agree. I think the beginning of the book was a little slow, but once you started rolling through all of the action and everything, they got to the island, it kind of started to pick up pace and became more of an interesting read.
I agree. How'd you like the ending?
So I was not a huge fan of the ending. It felt almost as though it was kind of thrown together. I feel like the whole entire book led up to an ending that lasted about 5 pages, and I don't think it did a wonderful job of tying up all the loose ends. It almost just stated one statement for each character. So I feel like it could have been drawn out a little bit more, a little more in depth.
Yeah, I almost felt like the author he got bored and he was just like, you know what, I don't feel like writing anymore, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I think he just kind of got tired of the book and just kind of pieced the ending together with what he had left in him.
Or maybe he was like, this book's getting pretty long. I can't write anymore. It was one of the two.
So if you were him, what would you have done to make it any better?
Well, I definitely would have prolonged it. I would probably have made the start of the book, I would probably have made it faster. My apologies. I would probably make it a lot faster because I felt like the beginning was a little slow. And then when you got to the ending, then you'd have more space, or it wouldn't feel as bad as you prolonged it out.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the ending was stretched out. I mean, the beginning was stretched out a little bit too much. It kind of took away from the ending. So the ending wasn't quite as powerful as it would have been if he had drawn it out and given an intense explanation of where each character is after the adventure and everything. So I think that's one of the ways that it could have been fixed. But I don't think it was absolutely terrible. I mean, there were pieces of it, I liked how he told where all the characters were, but I think he could have gone way more in depth.
Yeah, it was just clear, it just didn't go, it was clear what happened, but you didn't, you're like, okay, what's next, I want to know more,
Yeah. It's almost like he cut it short for the reader.
And I'm not totally against the long beginning. I didn't think it was, I understand it, it's a book, you have to show the background, but I feel like in a book that comes with the story. You don't have to do that all at the beginning. But I understand where he was coming from.
Yeah, I feel like the beginning wasn't a terrible length. It's really difficult to set the style and the setting that he needed to set for this book, especially because it's so different from the world that we live in now.
I agree. And I mean, when it was written, it wasn't how it is now. So I guess, I don't know. So I have a few questions, and I can give you my answer, and then I can get your take on it. But I have a few Socratic seminar questions. My first one is, why does the author choose Jim, a young boy, to narrate the story rather than one of the crewmates or adults? And my personal answer was that I think he used a young boy to show the reader the mind of an innocent person, and allows to have all the first experience that Jim has. Because when Jim experiences death, his dad's death or the captain's death, Billy Bones, when he dies, that's his first 2 deaths in life, and you just see how that is to him. And so I think he really tried to show the innocence of a young boy, rather than if you were to go through the story as, a grown man. Like, he's already experienced a lot of things. He's grown up, he's strong, and some things wouldn't come across as developed to him. And I also think he chose a young boy because you get to see Jim kind of mature throughout the story. I feel like he grows as a person by the end of it.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like by using Jim, he almost took away, like he added wonder to the story. Because Jim's experiencing all these things for the first time, there's almost like a wonder in everything. Even if it's bad, you get to see like the fullest extent of how he feels about it. Because most of these things he's never experienced before. I think that's really important to the story because you get almost more of an in-depth feeling. And you almost sympathize with him more because he's a kid and he's experiencing all these things for the first time. So I think it was really important that he was narrating the entire story.
Yeah, I agree. So I can keep asking questions, or we can go back and forth. Which would you rather do?
I can go. Bouncing off of Jim as the narrator, I noticed on pages, I think it was pages 119 to 136 in my book, the narration of the book actually switched from Jim to the doctor. So my question is more, how does the author's choice to switch the narrator of the story, how does that affect the plot? I said that by switching it, you almost get more of a mature take on what's happening. So from the point of view of an adult, the mutiny almost seems like a whole different story. Whereas Jim, he's more afraid of it because he's young and has never experienced these things. The doctor's more mature about it. So they have more like intense decisions that they're making. They almost have a strategical view of the mutiny rather than Jim, who's almost freaking out about it. And also, the section where it swaps, Jim is out in the forest by himself. So we get to see that extra part of the plot that Jim's not taking part in. So I think that's really important so that we can see the whole entire view of the plot of the text. And also we get to experience events that Jim would not experience.
Yeah, I was going to say that the most logical reason is just because he's not part of the story really at that point. So that's why. But also you get to see it from a more mature view. I agree. And I mean, you pretty much covered it. I mean, you get to see how Dr. Livesey feels, and it's more of a mature view.
Yeah, and if it hadn't switched, we would have missed the whole entire part of how the whole group gets off of the ship and how they find the stockade and everything. And that really would have left a giant hole in the plot of the story. So it was extremely important.
Yeah, because if Jim and Ben Gunn just showed up to the stockade, you'd probably be asking some questions, But since you get to have both points of view, it really brings the story together.
Yeah, I agree.
Is that all?
Yeah, that's all for that question.
Okay. My question is, what is a symbol throughout the story, and what does it represent? And I said one symbol is a flag. There's definitely more, but my main one was the flags, because the main two flags are the Union Jack and the Jolly Roger. And the Union Jack's the English flag, and then the Jolly Roger's the pirate flag. And I just said that the Union Jack represents confidence and good, and then the pirate flag represents evil and fear, because it really strikes fear in Jim when he sees that flag. But when they're getting shot at by the cannons and they decide to leave the flag up at the stockade, it gives them a sense of confidence that they're better than the pirates, that they know they're better people and that they can win. And it really gives them comfort, especially Captain Smollett, since he is the captain.
Yeah, and I think that the inclusion of the flags, it also like unifies each side of the mutiny. So the captain continues to fly the flag at the stockade and everything, just because it's like a symbol that they're on the right side of the fight and that they're all going to stay together and stay loyal to each other. I think that that's really important. And then another symbol that I noticed in the book was the black spot. I know it was mentioned when they were in the Admiral Bimbo at the beginning, and it was also given to Silver later in the book. But I think that the black spot represented death, because every time that it appeared in the book, someone was either facing death or facing a trial that would possibly lead to death. So I think that was really important, and the inclusion of it just kind of helped to symbolize or even foreshadow that someone was important in the story was going to die. So I think that was a very important symbol throughout the book.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
So I had another question. Now I think this one's important, but so I was wondering why the squire, like towards the middle of the book, decided to let Silver bring the crew and choose the crew rather than letting the captain choose the crew. I feel like if you're going to have someone as your captain, they should get to pick who's going to work for them. I think that it was wrong of the squire to let the cook bring the crew and choose the crew. I think that was really crucial to the text, but I feel like he's almost like going against the captain by not letting him bring his own people or have his own workers, and it almost destroys like all the loyalty to the captain.
Yeah, I agree with that. That still puzzles me, actually, but I guess you could say like Long John has more connections, maybe he knows like his crew better, and I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, that is true. Long John, I guess he could have seen that Long John has a lot of experience, and the way that he talks throughout the story, he's very convincing. So I guess maybe that could have led the squire to make that decision. But I still feel like it was the wrong decision.
Yeah, and he's a very like strong and confident person, and he's very convincing all throughout the story. Like when Jim first sees him, he's described as like he's not what you'd expect to be like a pirate. Like he's the complete opposite. Like he's got a good temper. He's like got his money under control. He seems cool and relaxed while he's like he can still talk to people, and he's not the like Billy Bones or like Pew, he's not that type of pirate.
Yeah, he's almost like a negotiator instead of a pirate.
Yes. Well, um, we can do one more question.
Yeah.
For the break. But how do you? So Captain Smollett and Long John, they're both leaders of their two sides, and they have completely different styles of leadership. And so, how do they differ? And what do you think works better? And my personal answer was, Silver likes to strike fear in his companions. He makes all his companions listen to him because they are scared of him and the consequences of saying no. And a perfect example of this is when Silver kills Tom just because he declined the offer to join the mutiny. And this style works well when things are going good, because when things are going good, you're not necessarily scared of like when something bad happens, and so you're listening and you're not like worried about that. But when things go downhill and all you have is fear for your leader, you're gonna run as soon as you get the chance. And I think that makes Smollett, his leadership style is to bring people up rather than break them down. And all the crewmates respect him because he's more respectful to them. and his followers towards the end, they're more loyal because it's not that like it's when Silver is leading, it's that he is better than his followers, and that's not the case with Smollett. And I think that makes Smollett's leadership style better and more important because it helps bring the team together.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Smollett he doesn't use fear like Silver does, but instead he's more strict in everything, but I think that earns him a level of respect. And I think that he has enough respect for the people of his crew so that they want to work with him, they want to be around him. So I think that gives him more of an upper hand as far as leadership goes. I mean, we see that throughout the book, like Silver, who kind of just controls with fear. We see that throughout the book, he's constantly being turned on by his men, and they don't really see him as a leader. They see him as one of them, and there's several points where he loses power. But Smollett, on the other hand, he just has too much respect from the people that work for him and work around him. So I think that they respect him too much to leave him. And you really see this throughout the book because they all always stay together under his leadership. He's never questioned like Silver. He's always trusted. Any of his judgments trusted. So I think he's got upper hand as far as leadership style.
I agree. Well, let's go to commercial break, and then we'll be back in a minute.
Do you enjoy beachfront property with the occasional seafaring man joining you with your stay? There's plenty of rum, plenty of fun, and for only 10 pieces of 8 per night, you could get a full room at the Admiral Benbow. If you were to stay there 7 days, that price is cut in half. For only 5 pieces of 8 per night, you can stay 7 days at the Admiral Benbow. Come to the outskirts of Kids Cove and see for yourself today the Admiral Benbow Inn.
Have you been looking for a week-long getaway? Well, you're in luck. Here on the Hispaniola, we offer a week-long vacation to our famed island, where crystal clear water and beautiful views are around every corner. For just 100 pieces of 8, passengers will get the chance to work as part of the crew and experience a crew mutiny firsthand. This real-life reenactment gets our passengers as close to the real thing as possible. Come with us and live a life of a pirate on board the Hispaniola.
Welcome back to the break. We're back to the podcast now. And I have another question, so I think we should get right to it again. How does the situation of Ben Gunn connect to the world today, and what are some examples of it? And this is kind of an abstract question. And what I really meant by that question is like, what's like how Ben Gunn is marooned on an island. He's alone and he's outside of society. And coming back to people again, it was a little difficult. You know, Jim thought he was a cannibal at first. And so I said that an example of this today, and this is a little bit of a reach, but it's like as homeschool kids go into the real world, like college or high school, those people they've struggled. They haven't struggled because they've been home, but they have only been around people who are also homeschooled. And so when they get into the high school or college or wherever they go, it's a completely new dynamic, and that can make it harder to make friends, you know, and do the things on their own. Like Ben Gunn, when he comes back to people, he's looked on as different, which some people might look onto those people as different because they have done different things throughout their life, you know, not have normal public school.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I feel like when Ben was marooned on the island, he almost loses like all of his social skills. I mean, it says he's been there for 3 years, so that's 3 years that he hasn't seen a person. So that's really going to affect you mentally. You're not going to know how to interact when you see people, and we kind of see this when he meets Jim. It's a really odd interaction. He almost doesn't know what to do or what to say. And I agree with your connection to homeschool people. I mean, I'm friends with one, and they're not necessarily weird or anything, but it's almost like
No, I wasn't saying
difficult.
that, but I wouldn't say they're weird, but it's just they've had different experiences, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like he plays on our baseball team, and I know he's not as well around people because he spends a lot of time around people that he's extremely comfortable with. So, yeah, I see how you can connect that to Ben Gunn because he's not around strangers very often, so he doesn't interact with people that he's not comfortable around.
Yeah, yeah.
So, my next question, so constantly throughout the book, there's several instances where they sing songs. So, I wanted to know what you felt the songs, like how they were affecting the setting or the mood of the story. So, I said that the songs, they had lines such as like yo ho ho and a bottle of rum, lines like that. I said that they helped with the authenticity of the story. They made the characters, all the dialogue and verbiage used within the book, they make it seem like more believable. And the author almost uses it to almost like develop the setting further because he kind of connects it to like the time period. And I know like a lot of modern movies and stuff, they all use those phrases and quotes and songs to like connect to the time period. So I think it was a really clever way for him to develop setting and also develop more of like it constantly talks about the devil and stuff in the songs, and it almost foreshadows death and talks about like a more ominous mood.
Yeah, I agree with the songs. It definitely adds to the time period, you know, and like the authenticity of being pirates, you know, on a ship. But I also think that when they're singing it, it causes some type of comfort almost, you know, just to pass the time, you know, because they are like they're going on an adventure, you know, they're leaving people behind, and a lot of those people are new to each other, and it really provides comfort.
Yeah, that does make sense because a lot of the times they're singing in times where they're all hanging out on the boat and stuff, and they're almost homesick when they start singing these songs. So I can see how they kind of just like bring comfort to them, but at the same time they're used to like foreshadow the rest of the book.
Yeah. Well, my final question, and this is directed towards you specifically and me, but if you were Jim and offered the position to be cabin boy, would you go? And I personally think I probably would go, but I think it would depend on how close I was with my mom, because as Jim just lost his father, and then he's just leaving his mom, and he has to there's another boy who has to go help out with the inn, and I think that would be a very difficult decision for me to just leave my mom alone, and I think but I think I would go, because losing someone like that, like your dad, and then I feel like it'd be very good for me to go out on an adventure like that, as long as I made sure things were okay at home.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it would be extremely hard to leave your mom after your dad just died and having to go through all that. At the same time, I'm with you. I would have totally gone. I mean, could you imagine finding a treasure map that's going to lead you to a crazy amount of money and just giving it to someone else and not going? I mean, he's given like
Yeah.
the opportunity of a lifetime, and he almost has to sacrifice leaving his mom alone just to capitalize on the things that he's been given. So I would definitely go, but I understand how it's really difficult for him to leave his mom there and leave her with someone else that he doesn't necessarily know, given the circumstance. But I mean, money is money, and we all want it. So, and I guess he could have also seen like a way to help his mom by getting the money, because I know they have to work really, really hard at the inn and stuff because they don't have a lot of money. So he could have almost seen it as like an out to almost like make the rest of their life better, and it was like a golden opportunity.
You could, I agree, but at the same time, you could think about it as if, like, you got a treasure map from the pirate, and that treasure map could just not be real. Like, or someone could have already gotten it. You don't know, because you don't really know too much about where that treasure map came from. You really don't know, and Jim doesn't know. And so how, like, there's a big uncertainty principle, and you don't really know. So it would be hard to just leave your mom for that. You don't even know if it's treasure, how much treasure, and like, Ben Gunn already was there. He already moved it. Like, imagine if they didn't come across him and the treasure wasn't there. And so it's just, there's a big uncertainty principle, and I think I'd really have to think about it.
Yeah, it would be really difficult to just have all that uncertainty. I mean, it could just be an absolute scam, and you can never know. But I think Jim weighed his options very well, and especially since he had like support from the doctor and everyone else, he was more surrounded with people that he trusted. So I think that he trusted their judgment, and that almost like affected his decision to go.
Yeah.
Okay, so for my last question, at the beginning of the book, the author, like before the first chapter, the author decided to include an epigraph, and it kind of just like addresses the reader directly, but I thought that it was extremely important to the text, and I was wondering how you feel it affected the text. I said that it really helps, like the songs, it really helps to build the believability of the text, because he's almost setting the stage for the time period and everything by using what we understand as like the old sailor kind of language and everything. So he kind of just helps to set the stage for the book, and it also saves him a lot of time at the beginning of the book, because he doesn't have to go through and describe the time period, and you kind of have a good picture in your head based off of like the typical pirate archetype. You have a good idea in your head where he doesn't have to like extensively describe the setting and everything.
Yeah, and it really lets the author just skip the once upon a time, there was this, it was in this year. He can put that out, and then you know what you're getting into. It's about pirates, Treasure Island, and then you read this and you're like, okay, so this can be the type of language they're using. And then you get into the introduction and you immediately are jumping into characters, immediately dialogue, There's no like and I know we talked about earlier that we felt like the introduction was like, or like the beginning of the story was a little prolonged, but they did add a lot of background information, but there was no like, it wasn't very specific, you had to kind of put pieces together, and that beginning part really helps.
Yeah. Instead of like just straight laying it out, it almost made it as like a puzzle for the reader. Kind of just sets up like archetypes that we all understand, that old pirate feel, and it saves him so much time, and it's so clever, and it also helps. I mean, when I first read it at the beginning, it really hooks the reader, because you're really excited to get into the story with something that strong to start it. You just want to know more about their adventure, just because of the way that the whole poem and everything sets up. You get really, really interested in it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll hope to see you next time.